So hi, my name is Roosa Räisänen. I'm the supply manager at Puro.earth, the world's first marketplace for CO2 removal. So today we'll talk about the third-party verification system that we have in place here at Puro.earth. And to help me do this, we have a special guest here today, Philip Link from Energy Link Services. Hi, Philip. Thank you for joining the call today.
Hi, Roosa. Lovely afternoon here in Sydney, Australia.
Yeah, very nice to see you, as always. Before we jump into today's topic, let me just recap how the Puro.earth marketplace works. So we have both suppliers and buyers meeting at the marketplace, and suppliers are those who can produce the carbon removal certificates and sell them at the marketplace, and buyers are those who have a need to offset their emissions. For our suppliers who sell the verified removals, this means that they can get an extra income to accelerate their business. And on the buyer's side, we know that our buyers are able to neutralize their emissions that they can't avoid. So let's move on to the topic of the day, which is carbon removal verification. And here in the slide, you can see some of the risks and remedies related to carbon removals. And Phil, I think it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on this list, and maybe you could give us an example of an audit that you have recently completed, and how you managed to tackle these questions then.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Roosa and Puro, for having me here, and also acknowledging the fact that we are the first auditors that are based out of here in Australia. And we feel very privileged to take on that responsibility and role. So verification. Verification is very, very important to really underpinning the overall integrity of a carbon scheme, and that might be from an offsetting perspective or removal perspective in this case, through to reporting. And so what we've been extremely impressed to see is a very well developed set of methodologies that's been prepared by the Puro team, and in the same notion a very robust and transparent verification process. So I think the best way to talk about some of the risks and remedies that we've identified throughout the audit process is really to walk you through a project that was completed, and I'm be very pleased to speak about the first Puro project that was installed in Australia or took place in Australia, which created the first set of corks, which in addition to that were then sold to Microsoft, and so. And I think it's quite well known now. The Rainbow Bee Eater project that was developed by Peter Burgess, that was done down in South Australia, really sings a lot to the structure and nature of how a Puro project is created and developed. And the way the genesis really of the audit process was initially for Puro to come to us with the audit pack and the evidence, which we then review, and the fundamental components of the audit pack are the life cycle assessment, the lab testing, and any particulars that are involved in and around the project, and really that's anything from where is the biomass coming from through to what is being done with the char, and so we leverage that information against the methodology.
I think it would be really interesting to hear how you tackled the issues like not to mix avoided or reduced emissions with removals. What type of things you what did you do to make sure that we didn't mix avoided and reduced emissions with removals in particular? Yeah.
So that's a very good question. I think that's the distinguishing point of the Puro.earth scheme, is that we are really looking here at removals. We're not talking about offsets of a different kind. This is something that we really need to test the permanence of the cork, and by permanence it means that it is really the net negativity, and from that perspective, what we rely very much on is the lab test and the information that's been presented to us from the testing, the independent testing that verifies and validates the composition, the chemical composition of the biochar that's being produced. Now, in the Rainbow Bee Eater case, they were taking waste timber sources from construction and demolition waste in and around the Victorian and South Australian regions of Australia. And that waste stream was being processed and brought to the site, the Holler Fresh site, and was fed into the pyrolysis machine. So from that first component, we already know that the waste, that the feedstock for the pyrolysis unit is a woody biomass. Yeah. So that inherently contains significant amounts of carbon, and as a result of that, the consistency of that feedstock and the consistency that was produced from that feedstock that we reviewed demonstrated, and then is further demonstrated by the lab test to contain a carbon content, and that's what we use really to calculate the CORCs, or the CO2 reduction certificates.
Yeah, absolutely. And how about these? There's usually, or sometimes there's concerns for double counting with carbon removals. How was this issue tackled with the case of Rainbow Bee Eater?
Look, so I think double counting is always an interesting topic, and I think from my perspective, and the way that we do look to verify the double counting that doesn't take place is really to ensure that the development or the creation of the CORCs, as defined under the methodology, has met all the specific requirements. Now, that goes from anything from checking that the registry, the records in the registry match what has been produced, or the production records of the char and subsequently the CORCs, and really reverse engineering or doing the recalculations to ensure for us to satisfy ourselves that no double counting has taken place and that the records that Puro has via the registry are valid.
And I guess that goes also to the risk of reversal. The same logic applies here.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I think that the fundamental difference between other offsetting schemes or either other carbon programs is that with the Puro scheme, it is very, very important to test and validate that the end use of the char is not fundamentally not being burnt. So what we do is we spend a significant amount of time, and in the case of the Rainbow Bee Eater project, we sought to understand exactly where that char was going, and sought to validate actually through third or customer interviews or off-taker interviews to confirm that the volumes of char that we're saying were being taken off site for the use of soil conditioner were actually taking place. And we felt that was really an important check, because it is very clear in the Puro methodology, the biochar methodology, that utilizing or that there needs to be a very demonstrable use of that char, and fundamentally can't be burnt, because that again lends itself to the net negativity.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe you could still elaborate a little bit on how you ensure that the credit volumes are accurate. How do we get an accurate CORC number that we can issue to the registry?
Sure. Well, again, it comes down to really, in my view, 3 to 4 very fundamental things. The first one is, can we ensure and understand the nature of the feedstock? So that's the first thing. And as I mentioned, in Rainbow Bee Eater's case, there was quite a consistent feedstock, which was construction and demolition timber waste. The second thing is the robustness of the life cycle assessment. Where has the production facility boundary been set? What's been included? What's been excluded? And why? And within that, we test a lot of the metering, because there obviously are some ancillary energy-consuming devices or emissions that take place through the production of the biochar itself. So we need to make sure that if that all of those ancillary emission sources are being counted and being measured, and if they're not being measured, what are the engineering assumptions that have taken place to estimate what those emissions are. So that's a very important component of the LCA. Once we've done our test of and we believe that the emissions boundary, or the project boundary rather, has been correctly defined in the LCA. The second thing is what's being done with the syngas. And in the case of Rainbow Beta, it's a fantastic application of where fundamentally the project is delivering heat to an industrial or a commercial production facility for distribution or sale of herbs into edible herbs into the Australian market. And so previously that heat source was derived from fossil fuel, being gas, and now it is using a syngas to power the boiler, which then provides the heat. So we need to also, and we were able to see through our site visit, which because of COVID was done virtually.
Yeah.
We were able to see that boiler in operation and that adjoining greenhouse which was producing the herbs. Now again, then going back to the final point, which is where is the char going, and what's being done with it. And I think the other point, Roosa, to mention is we also rely very heavily on that lab test and lab report to determine the carbon content and the chemical content of the char, which is what we really use to fundamentally use to create to develop the cork number.
Yeah. I think finally it would be interesting to hear how you mentioned that you've been doing these audit visits remotely. I think it would be interesting to hear how this whole COVID situation has changed your practices, or what sort of extra measurements you've had to take into account now that you're also doing these verifications remotely.
Yeah, it's actually been a fascinating experience. So having sort of a wealth of assurance and audit experience, doing this for sort of close to 15 years now, it was really the first time where we had to entertain the notion of a remote site visit. Now, anyone that knows these facilities aren't simple in their nature. I mean, we're talking about quite complicated industrial processes. Added to that, we're also talking about very remote and rural, in most cases, facilities. So whilst they are small in nature, they are inherently complex because of the bells and whistles that are required to produce the char or to produce the heat. So we had to really take a very innovative approach, and I must say, Australia being the size of the country that it is, mobile or cell phone reception isn't always ideal. So initially we had to be think quite quickly on our feet, because then I'm sure that those that were involved in the audit will also recall with fondness how we had to complete the Rainbow Beta audit. We initially felt that we could do a sort of a site walkthrough, and we could do that in real time, but it turned out that the phone reception and mobile reception just would not allow for that. So within the first 15 minutes or so, we had to take a different approach, which was to reconvene at a later date and for Peter to walk through the site and present us with essentially a video of all aspects of the facility, including where the feedstock was coming from through to the end use of the char. And subsequently, we were walked through each of those components, and we were able to stop the video, examine certain things, ask some questions, and off the back of that, issue a response or issue a request for information to further provide the checks and balances that we needed in order to issue our audit report.
Yeah, I think it's been fascinating to see how this sort of very, very incumbent industry has been able to respond to this.
And I think one other thing I'll say, Roosa, is, sorry to interrupt you there, but I think it's interesting because it has actually taught me and others that we can rely on technology to undertake checks and balances that were needed. And I've actually subsequently implemented, not just with Puro projects or Puro audits, verifications, but we've done it more broadly in some of our other audit and assurance work.
Yeah. Any other things that come to your mind before we move on?
Look, I think from that perspective, no. I mean, there's always more to talk about. These are fascinating projects, and the Puro scheme itself is an excellent one, which we're very pleased to be involved in.
Yeah. So thank you, Phil, for joining today. Maybe as a concluding slide, I think it would be interesting to hear your take on these verification opportunities that this Puro.earth verification brings to the suppliers. What sort of extra things can they attain aside from receiving the corks?
Sure, and I think that this is really the where the rubber hits the road, if I can say that, with the Puro scheme. So we've seen some amazing applications of these pyrolysis units, in particular in industrial applications, which have really driven a complete reverse engineering or a different way of thinking when it comes to either electricity or heat production on industrial facilities. And that has really resulted in the facilities not being required to rely on fossil fuels, for example, for the production of electricity or heat at use in the site, which has meant that there's an avoided cost that's come with that. Which in turn allows the businesses to be more profitable and in fact allow for expansion. So when you couple that with the monetization of the carbon removals that are taking place with regards to the corks, you really are presenting the businesses with a fantastic operational efficiency in that regard. And look, every project's different, but in the case of the Rainbow Beater project, there was definitely a fuel switch, and we went from reliance on LPG to produce to create the heat through to to essentially a carbon-free energy source, being the syngas coming off the unit.
Yeah.
And I think that also, to your second point, really helps to showcase the net negativity and those double effects that are taking place with regards to the scheme itself. And I think it's never in doubt, and you can't dispute the fact that that the science and the chemistry behind biochar demonstrates its permanence, demonstrates its longevity as a carbon store. I like to say, and I've said this a few times now, this is nature's carbon capture and storage. And so from that perspective, we don't need to be engineering solutions to capturing carbon. We've already got technologies to do that, and there's no better way to store carbon in a really permanent form, which has added benefits of water filtration and soil conditioning and a number of other things than in biochar.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to accessibility, I think that's a very interesting point, because it goes back to where these projects are situated. We're talking about rural and remote areas of Australia. We're sort of midway through a project in the United States at the moment, whereby it is a huge industrial system and process in the remote northwest of the US, and so we're seeing revenue streams. We're seeing innovation taking place in parts of the world which may not necessarily have access to that. And I think that lends itself also to the robustness and the attractiveness of a cork when it comes to a business setting either its carbon neutrality objectives and using a cork to offset its residual emissions going forward. So there are a wealth of additional co-benefits that align with sustainable development goals that come out of the Puro.earth cork scheme. So again, I commend Puro.earth for what they're doing, and I hope to remain firmly involved in the scheme, either as a verifier or in any other capacity, because I'm right behind you guys.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. Yeah, well, thank you for this lovely conversation today, Phil. And yeah, very interesting insights today. And yeah, so thank you for today, and I'll see you soon.
It's been my pleasure, and I thoroughly enjoy working with you, Roosa.
Yeah.
See ya.
Thanks. Bye.